name is Chuck, and I live here in Colorado Springs. I'm actually a native. My father had a very robust career in the Navy. And so, yeah, his stories influenced my decision. I love the ocean. I love being out at sea. And the Navy had a different program where in the reserves we were very independent. We didn't deploy as a whole unit. We deployed just as an individual. So I could sign up for a year in Iraq or a year in Afghanistan or 6 months in Netherlands or 6 months in Korea, and then being protected by federal law, I was always able to come back to my civilian job. It was a fantastic opportunity. I was very blessed. Well, I went in to AOCS. It was Air Officer Candidate School, and it was down in Pensacola. It was a great experience. I think it was about 3.5 months, and I loved every second of it. I loved the discipline of it. I loved the tradition of the Navy, and the history of our Navy, and meeting so many other people from walks of life. And I met some merchant mariners, and even though it was at Pensacola, the people I went through school with chose different routes. Some were going to be JAG officers. Some were going into the air branch, and I met a merchant marine there. And all different kinds of people with their ambitions as well. So I liked that. I learned from them and shared with them too what their ambitions were. But again, I was unique in that I was going into the reserves. And my first duty station was up here at Cheyenne Mountain, also where my dad worked. Dad had a top secret clearance as a civilian. He worked here in town. He worked at where is now the Olympic Training Center, which then was Anti-Air Force Base. And then he worked at the Chidlaw building, which was part of Peterson Air Force Base. And it was over on Bijou Street. And although we didn't talk about, top secret things, I knew some of the projects that he was involved with. But then my career was a little more technical. He did a lot with maps and things, and so he did a lot with his hands. And then when I went through, everything was more computerized. So that was a little different. But I worked in there, and I enjoyed working inside the mountain. And I got my clearance. I became an intelligence officer, and I enjoyed learning about. Of course, it was during the Cold War, actually. It was exciting, and I began to learn Russian. I took Russian language classes from a lady from Kazakhstan, and I really dove into, I guess, Russian history and the way of life, and I enjoyed that very, very much. So there were a lot of exciting things going on, and it was different. My billet was different in that I would learn from other reservists around the country that they were just doing busy work. They weren't involved in real-time activities. It just, like I said, busy work. It didn't make an impact. Whether they were working on the weekend or during the week, that's great. If they weren't, well, nobody missed them. That no one missed their job, their products. But up here at NORAD, it was real time. Everything was very critical. I felt what I did was important and needed by other commands around the world. And it was just an absolute thrill to work up there. I volunteered to work many weeks, and in fact years. I did almost 3 years active duty up there, and it was a great opportunity as well. Like I said, we were doing really good work up there. And I felt very energized with that. I went to Korea, and I had 6 tours there in Korea, in Daegu and Pohang and Shinhae. And Shinhae is the headquarters for the ROK Navy. And so I developed a great admiration of the Korean culture and the people, not just the food, but their work ethic and their dedication to a family was very striking to me. And I highly, highly respect that culture. Just couldn't get enough of it. And I like I said, admire them for their fortitude and their struggles through World War II as well. They have their own history that was very difficult to comprehend. I mean, what their struggles were. But I enjoyed it. They're a very warm culture. And then I went on to Belgium. I worked at NATO headquarters in biometrics. I was a biometric officer, and I wrote the concept for biometrics. It's a policy for all NATO sea, maritime, and shore, land assets. And at that time, piracy was just starting to regrow off the coast of Somalia and West Africa. And so to help identify and prosecute pirates, so they use biometrics, which I was a part of through NATO. And I signed up for a tour in the Netherlands. And again, a great place to live. I thought if I was going to retire in America, I'd probably retire in the Netherlands. So I was a commanding officer there at a small, very small U.S. facility, intel facility at a NATO headquarters there. They have a small NATO headquarters in Brunsum, Netherlands. And I signed up for a tour in Iraq, working for Task Force Troy. It was a counter IED analysis, and my job was to do mappings of IED explosions, type of detonations, and the routes, the time of day, the day of week, and help with convoy planning. So people, when they would do convoy planning, they would come in, stop by, and they'd say, Chuck, we plan to take this route, and what are the threats? What common denominators are there? Days a week, what time should we go if we can, or avoid? What do we look for, and things like that. And also, not just the type of explosions and detonators, but the different cells. There's different cells, if you will, of terrorist activity in Iraq, and where some of these devices are coming from. And we found some were coming from other countries that they would use in Iraq. So, and that was, again, the intel work is all extremely interesting because we were doing really, really important work, and I was finding out things that's going on in the world that, just nobody knows. And I felt like I was really contributing a lot, especially in Iraq. And then I liked it a lot, and I signed up for a year in Afghanistan. I did 6 months at the Joint Intelligence Operations Center in Kabul, and then 7 months down in Kandahar. Iraq was 2007, and Afghanistan was 2008 to 2009. My work in NORAD most of it was strategic intelligence. It was regarding, submarines, strategic threat, large platforms, strategic bombers, that were nuclear capable, and their routes and patterns. And so I went from some air activity into the submarine force in my work up there, just because of the strategic threat. In Iraq and Afghanistan, it was more tactical. It was more on the ground, right in front of us, right where we are. And again, people would always come in to our intel shop and ask for updates. And it's like I said, route planning and different terrorist cells and where they're gaining their weapons, and ingress, egress routes. And so that was really a nice change too, and because, like I said, tactical on one side and strategic on the other, and then counter piracy missions, with NATO. I don't think anyone had it better than I. Maybe pilots, launching off aircraft carriers or something. I did serve on a couple carriers too for a short time. One was the Kitty Hawk, which is now sold to a scrapyard, and then I later served aboard the Nimitz. So, and I took along with me a pipe that my dad he used when he was aboard destroyers, and so I thought, well, I'm going to carry on that tradition. So I brought this pipe, and I would smoke it out there on the smoking area on the ships.